huge issue. Housing affordability. There's a picture of Jack Louse standing in front of the council a few years ago. Now, before I tell you what this picture shows, let me tell you, I had a friend who sold his business in Atlanta and he moved to Colorado. And he bought 50 acres and built a $5 million home. Beautiful home on the bluff, just gorgeous. It's one that would be in most magazines about architecture. The housing code in that county was one binder, and it took them 30 days to get permitted and start construction. The reason I'm telling you that is because the picture of Jack Louse showed the housing code and regulations that you have to go through to build a home in Whatcom County. Stacked from the ground to his chest. That's absurd.
Yeah.
Yes.
And yet, when we ask them to get together and try to fix that in the past and do what we call a code scrub, let's get rid of all the crap that doesn't make sense. They got stuck on the first issue. No, that's not even the worst part. The worst part is the first issue was, what's a trash can and where should it be placed? And after 60 days of not being able to move past that, they closed up and they said, okay, we can't do it. And so the code continues to get worse and worse and worse and be compounded with more regulations and more problems. And we continue to add more fees and more taxes and more costs to it and continue to restrict the property that you can build on. I met a gentleman out here in Birch Bay. He had 40 acres. 40 acres, and the county told him there wasn't a single place on that entire 40 acres that he could build a single family house. One house on 40 acres, and he can't build on there. In Birch Bay. He had a second property that he was doing that was a development project, 300 units. And he had to get water and sewer about 400 feet. They told him that there was wetlands in 3 different spots that were about 10 to 12 feet across. And that in order for him to go through that, even though the state and federal ecology said, hey, utilities are exempt, you don't have to pertain, like these rules don't apply, he could have done it anyway. But the county told him, no, in order for you to actually bring those utilities in to build those 300 homes, we're gonna need you to dig down 30 feet and you're gonna have to bore 10 to 12 feet under each of these wetlands. And you gotta do it twice, because one time for the water and then 10, 15 feet over, you gotta do it a second time for the sewer, right? When Ben and I went out there, because he was like pulling his hair out in frustration and he had already dug the pits, 30 feet, we climbed down there and there was no water in the pits. I was like, how can these be wetlands? It cost him $450,000. And his only recourse was, after 4 years of going through the process, yeah, you could get that exemption, but you're gonna have to start all over.
Good.
Where's the common sense? Now that's something where the county should get involved. The county council should get involved. Heck, quite honestly, that's something that the executive should have done. And they called the executive, and the executive said, call Tyler and Ben. Like, great, you don't want to solve the problem, so he called the 2 people that he knows can't solve the problem because we're not in the majority, right? But if we had a couple more people that really wanted to fix things, then we could. You're right, housing is a linchpin issue. It's the #1 reason we don't have better paying jobs here. The top 16 employers in Whatcom County have gotten together and told us that. And they've given us a dozen ways to fix it, and we literally laughed at them during their presentation and kicked them out and never had them come back, and then never addressed any of them. We have the wrong people elected. But here's the truth of the matter. Us being here tonight isn't fixing that. We're not changing anything sitting here. 10% of voters have turned out. 190, what's the number? How many voters do we have in Whatcom County now, Charlie?
158.
158, so 15,000 people have turned out. Okay? That means roughly 7,000 people will vote for each candidate, one way or another, in the general, right? When it gets down to 2. How many people is going to separate the difference between a winner and loser? 300?
If you're lucky.
You have, what, 30 people here. If each of you actually talked to 10 people and got them to turn in their ballots, just turn in their ballots and told them why you supported these candidates, what the problem was. Not the social media sound bites, not the headlines, the clickbait that you get in the Herald. But here's the real issues, and this is why we need these people there. You really could change the dynamic of the council. You would have an impact on the outcome of this race, and things in this county would begin to change for the better for everyone. Not just us, but our kids, and their kids, and our family and our friends that want to move here, and the homeless people that want to move here, and everybody else. It takes a little bit of effort, and I know a lot of us are shy and we don't want to get outside of our bubble, but it's either we do that today or tomorrow we're going to be spending $1 million for a house. And that's not far off because the county just agreed to pay $800,000 for a double-wide manufactured home.
Wow.
Yeah. So you tell me how far $1 million for a standard house is. I am begging you, please help these guys. Get on social media, collect the ballots from your neighbors and drop them off. The biggest issue we have is people will fill them out and they will leave them on the counter and they will forget and they don't turn them in. Call a friend or a family member and ask them if they voted and if they've returned it. And if they haven't, offer to pick it up for them and drop it in the ballot box.
Question for you, Tyler. Thanks for all
We don't
that.
do questions. Okay, go.
Yeah, but besides electing good people like Kamal and others here, what can the citizens do to start rattling the chains of some of these folks on county council? Like, could we go to meetings and speak up and say, hey, that's nonsense. Why is the meeting being adjourned in the middle of an important discussion? That's absolutely, ridiculous. How can we have a little more impact?
It's hard because once the meeting is adjourned, you don't have a chance to speak either. Quite honestly, you get a chance 3 minutes in the beginning of our general session in the evening to speak, and all of that stuff will either take place in committee meetings before or after, right? So, quite honestly, that's helpful, especially when you get a whole bunch of people on a specific issue. But if we're talking about systematic change, like long-term change and real impacts to our problems, it's got to be electing people that want to do the job. At the end of the day, and I'll tell you, they will pander, they will tell you everything you want to hear. You can read Barry's statement and you can see blatant, outright lies. The guy wrote in his ballot statement, I'm going to be fiscally responsible with your tax dollars because of the COVID crisis, and we need to be careful to do the economy, basically, right? He has never voted no on a budget request. He's never voted no on a budget. He's never voted no on a tax increase, on any spending item, period. And yet he's going to claim that he's fiscally responsible with your tax dollars. He's going to claim that he's the guy that led the negotiations with the stakeholder groups to solve the Cherry Point issue that we finally fixed or completed last night. And yet, for 3 years, I asked them to do a Cherry Point stakeholder group, and they refused. And the only reason it happened is because the stakeholders outside of the council got together and fixed it and brought it to us. So they'll tell us what we want to hear, but we got to hold them accountable. We got to go back and look at, like, what did you run your race on, and what have you actually done? If you want to solve homelessness, what's the data say? Has homelessness gotten better in the last 4 years? Nope. You said you want to fix housing and you want to do affordable housing. What's the data say? Has the affordable housing gotten any better in the last 10 years? Has the cost or living wage jobs? Are people making more money in our county? How about childcare? There's not a single issue that they've run on that's actually done any better. They're all doing worse. But they're not worried because they get elected by the same group, because most of us don't pay attention and we just don't want to go outside that bubble and do something that we're uncomfortable with. And I get it, that sucks, it's hard, right? I mean, I know I did it when I ran for the first time, and quite honestly, it took a lot of phone calls to finally get me to register for 30 minutes before the filing deadline this time, because it's tough. Like, getting outside the bubble sucks, right? But if we don't do it, who else will?